Hey folks, making this short video for you because there's been some breaking news this afternoon in United States v. Comey, a case that we've been following diligently since the indictment came out, and we've been asking a few questions about it since the indictment came out because there were some oddities in that indictment and in documents filed in the same day that this case came about, back on September 25th of this year. And we've come back around in the case to those seemingly irregular filings in at the beginning of this case. The hearing happened today in front of District Judge Nachmanoff, who is handling the case, and it did not go well for Lindsay Halligan, the US attorney appointed to the EDVA, or her staff, or DOJ. I said in a video from earlier this week, I think it was just like yesterday or the day before, that Comey got a huge win in the case. Halligan got an emergency stay, but there's a big mess for DOJ to clean up. And that is absolutely true. Before we get to it, my link tree is in the profile, wherever you're listening or watching this. It's also in the description of the video. There you can find all the places to follow me, all the places to watch and listen to me, and all the different ways to support. Thank you to everybody who buys me cups of coffee and who funds my Pacer addiction. I just finished recording like an hour or so ago a new episode of my podcast, and I'm right now uploading it on Substack. That's where it's going to be first. It's going to go out as soon as this upload finishes. I'm sending it out on Substack to all my subscribers. So justhuman.substack.com. Everything on there is free, and you get my podcast before anybody else. I'm also uploading it on Rumble, YouTube, and on X, but I'm scheduling it to not go out until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So if you want my podcast first, where we dig into an indictment of 9 Antifa members in Texas, and we dig into the latest filings in United States v. Comey, justhuman.substack.com. If not, if you want to watch it somewhere else or listen to it somewhere else, great. Enjoy. It'll be available to you on, let's see, it'll be Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Okay, so what happened today? Well, I'm not going to spend too much time. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that if you're watching this video, and you're watching me cover it, that you've probably kept up with my videos and threads on the case, so you're aware somewhat of where we're at in the case. There are big issues around the grand jury proceedings, possible misconduct by people involved in the investigation, attorney-client privilege communications being shown to an FBI agent who then testified to the grand jury, 2 indictments coming out of the grand jury, 1 failed, 1 passed, and yet there was only one time period of presentation to the grand jury and 1 period of deliberation. So how did they get 2 indictments out of the grand jury? Big problem. So there was a hearing in front of Judge Nachmanoff today, and according to Politico, who had reporters there at the hearing, and we're going to go ahead and understand right now, as we do in my audience, that Politico, just like any outlet, any news media outlet, has their own bias. And we're going to look past that bias, and we're going to try and extract from this news article only what appears to be factual and what lines up with other information that we have. So we got our discernment dialed up here. The Trump administration's criminal prosecution of former FBI Director James Comey appeared to be in serious jeopardy Wednesday, as the federal judge overseeing the case repeatedly questioned the validity of the grand jury indictment that charged Comey with lying to and obstructing Congress. U.S. District Judge Michael Nachmanoff pressed prosecutors during a hearing on the events around the September 25th charges against Comey, questioning whether the entire grand jury ever saw the 2-count indictment that a magistrate judge received after the grand jurors rejected 1 of 3 charges proposed by interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan. This issue was raised in a recent order just a couple days ago. Maybe it was yesterday. I made a video about it. I have a thread about it. I made a video about it called Huge Win for Comey. You can watch that video wherever you're watching this and get the full backstory on it. But in that order that he came up, he made 11 findings of irregularities and just issues with the grand jury process, and specifically the grand jury process in this case. Not the whole case, but 11 issues with the grand jury process and events surrounding it. And he pointed out that the second indictment was a new indictment, and therefore the undersigned, this judge, concluded after reviewing the grand jury transcript that the prosecutor would have presented the second indictment to the grand jury for consideration before it was returned in open court, meaning before she and the foreman signed it and gave it to the magistrate judge to go into the docket and bam, indict Comey. Before that happened, she should have shown it to the full grand jury and they done a presentation with it and they should have deliberated it. It appears that that may not have happened. The short time span between the moment the prosecutor learned that the grand jury had rejected one count in the original indictment and the time the prosecutor appeared in court to return the second indictment could not have been sufficient to draft the second indictment, to sign it, to present it to the grand jury, to provide legal instructions to the grand jury, to give them the opportunity to deliberate it and render a decision on the new indictment. If this procedure did not take place, that procedure I just described, if that did not take place, then this court, the judge who is overseeing the disclosure of grand jury materials here, is in uncharted legal territory, in that the indictment returned in open court was not the same charging document presented to and deliberated upon by the grand jury. If that's what happened, this thing is dead. Dead. Never seen anything like this. Now, I'm not, I haven't been covering court cases for a decade, but I have been covering them for 5 years. As a nerd and as a podcaster, never seen anything like this or heard of anything like this. But that's what he's talking about here. Nachmanoff, a Biden appointee, which I don't care about. Teachable moment here, guys. The press includes that information to try and sway you politically, either to think good or to think bad about whoever the judge is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the politics of the judge, and it doesn't matter who appointed the judge. What matters is whether or not the judge follows the rule of law. That's it. All that matters is whether or not the judge, and through his action, serves the ends of justice. That's all that matters. And I've seen judges appointed by any number of presidents from any number of political parties do a great job in the courtroom. The reason media includes that point right there is to add in a political charge to the situation. Not that the situation isn't political, it is. Nachmanoff was so intent on establishing the precise sequence of events that day that he briefly called Halligan to the courtroom lectern, prompting her first substantive public remarks since she secured the charges. "Your counsel of record, you can address the court," said Nachmanoff to Halligan, asking her to explain whether grand jurors beyond the foreperson were present when the original indictment and a narrower substitute one, the two-count indictment, were presented to a magistrate judge back on September 25th. Quote, "The foreperson and another grand juror was also present," said Halligan, apparently confirming that all the grand jury members present that day, which I think there were 23 of them, did not see the substitute indictment prepared after the group declined one of the false statement charges Halligan urged. Nachmanoff did not say precisely what action he was contemplating about the possible irregularity in the grand jury process, but his intense focus on the issue suggested he may view it as a critical and perhaps fatal error and problem in the case. As he addressed Halligan, the judge declared, quote, "Just wanted to make sure that indictment had never been seen by the full grand jury." Halligan confirmed that it had not. She then sat down after speaking for less than a minute. Folks, you can't indict somebody. You can't have a charging instrument against a defendant that's supposedly based on a full grand jury returning it when the full grand jury did not get a presentation on it, did not get instructed on the law on it, did not have a chance to deliberate, ask questions. It doesn't work that way. And it doesn't matter who the defendant is, whether it's you, me, James Comey, Trump. Doesn't matter. There's a right way to go about these things, and the right way exists in order to protect your rights and to protect the entire justice system and the process. It must be done the right way. Doesn't matter what we think of the defendant. It must be done the right way, or it's not justice at all. Assistant U.S. Attorney Tyler Lemons, who handled the bulk of the argument Wednesday, suggested the replacement indictment was a necessity due to the grand jury turning down one of the proposed charges. Quote, "They really had no other way to return it," he said. Well, other than at 4:30 that day when the other one didn't return, it was 6:40 p.m. when the jury got done deliberating. They could have ended that day and then come back a different day. Although there is no pending defense motion challenging the indictment so far, a lawyer for Comey, Michael Dreeben, seized on the issue, stating there is no indictment, adding that the statute of limitations ran out on September 30th, making the procedural misstep tantamount to a complete bar to prosecution. He's right. I think he's right about that. There is a thing where if you indict someone and it's right up against statute of limitations, and while they're under indictment, the statute of limitations expires, but something happens with the case, like a mistrial or a motion to dismiss because of some error, like something like this. Even though the statute of limitations expired, I believe it's 6 months. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like they have like a 6-month window to where they could bring the charge again. But if this is the kind of error it's based on, I don't think they can. I'm not sure. I've never been in this situation in covering a case before. The exchange about the validity of the indictment came at the tail end of more than an hour of argument focused on whether President Trump's calls for Comey to face charges and the unusual steps taken to bring them about have so tainted the case that it should be dismissed as vindictive and selective prosecution. See, this is another thing. These questions were asked by Nachmanoff, and he was trying to get to the bottom of this. I think it sounds like he was doing this while he had Halligan in the room. But I think it has everything to do with what just happened a couple days ago with the huge win for James Comey with this order by the magistrate judge handing the filter team issue, which got into the grand jury proceedings. His order where he found all these issues with the grand jury and ordered those materials disclosed to the defense. And Halligan came in immediately, just a couple hours later, and argued for an emergency stay to pause that order because they have objections to that order. They don't want to disclose this grand jury stuff to the defense. Nachmanoff came in hours after that and said, okay, it's granted in part. It's stayed for now. You have until Wednesday night. So today she has another hour and a half to file her objections. And then Comey's team responds by this Friday. And then Judge Nachmanoff is going to rule on this, on whether or not Judge Fitzpatrick's order stays goes forward, and Comey gets the grand jury materials. Comey's team wants the grand jury materials because they've suspected this stuff was going on, that there were all these irregularities, that there was a privilege spill, that there was violations of Comey's 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights, that the grand jury was tainted by a witness who was tainted. And Judge Fitzpatrick, after he looked at those same materials, said, yeah, I'm seeing all of that here. There's reason to believe those things may have happened. So I'm ordering the disclosure so the defense team can look at it and see if they want to construct a motion to dismiss based on one or more of those things. So I think Judge Nachmanoff has this on his brain, this order. And now that he has Halligan in this hearing, he's like, hey, clarify something for me. I think that's what just happened. So Lemons, one of the lead prosecutors in Comey's case, said the existence of a so-called declination memo, which could outline weaknesses in the case, might be considered internal work product after Judge Nachmanoff pressed the prosecutors on whether they had turned that over to Comey as part of discovery. Lemons said, no, that sort of material might be privileged. What? He repeatedly declined to answer, the prosecutor did, repeatedly declined to answer questions from Nachmanoff about the existence of a declination memo. Lemons added, however, that he has seen drafts of a declination memo, as well as a prosecutorial memo outlining the case against Comey. So he agreed he'd seen drafts, but he wouldn't answer whether or not a declination memo had actually been issued. This was reported by media that before Comey was indicted and before Halligan was installed, prosecutors and officials in the EDVA had looked at this case. They talked to Durham, who already examined this thing 5 years ago, or less than 5 years ago. And they had decided that there was not enough evidence to charge Comey, Daniel Richmond, who's person 3 in the indictment, or anyone else. However, they were looking for 2 different crimes than what the 2 crimes that are charged here. But there was a media report that that office had looked at indicting Comey on the 2 charges that Lindsay Halligan ended up bringing, and they decided there wasn't enough evidence here to indict him. Now, Nachmanoff is weighing, and the focus of this hearing was whether or not he would grant the motion to dismiss for vindictive and selective prosecution. Personally, I think no. You almost never see those things granted. And I mean, I think there's been some historical examples, but I don't believe that that's going to happen at all. So I don't think that's going to happen. But since he had them here, he asked him about this. Now, I've gone over in this thread. I went over all the events surrounding that magistrate's hearing, and then in recent videos, I've covered, like I said, the huge win for Comey video, and then in my upcoming video my new podcast that's going to come out tonight for Substack subscribers and for everybody else tomorrow morning, I go into the actual filings on the docket, and I take you through exactly what Magistrate Judge Fitzpatrick found was the problems with the grand jury proceedings, the materials they presented, the evidence, the privilege bill, all those things. So if you want to know more about this case and what's going on in it, please check out my threads and check out my podcast and my other short videos like this one. It really pays to pay attention to the details with this stuff. There's nuance here. There's many layers to what's going on. And with this case, there's 3 different judges involved. And 2 of those judges, as I told Eric Garland here, 2 of the 3 judges involved in this case may kill it before Thanksgiving. The other reason I would encourage you to check out some of my material on this case specifically is because when you dive into the documents and you read what is really going on in the case, you start to realize how so many influencers and social media clickbaiters and media outlets that are all the way to the left or all the way to the right, you start to realize how much information they leave out of their coverage and how they basically lead you along with reactionary posts and videos where they're just trying to inflame your emotions and your partisanship, basically. And sure, that gets reactions and it gets us to share and all those things. But for me, I want to know the facts and the truth. So, and that's what I'm all about finding here on this channel. So if you like that, check out my other videos and check out my podcast that comes out here shortly. So I'll see you on the next one.